Hello, I'm Becky. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to make some bread, and I remember the first time I ever made bread it didn't go very well, and I wasn't told why it didn't go well. So what I want to do is show you a really foolproof method so that you will have success if it's the first time you've ever done it. You do need to have very specific ingredients, and the main one obviously is the flour. I've got quite an array of flour here. It has to say strong on the label. It must say strong flour. And that's to do with the gluten. Gluten is glue. It's the sticky stuff that makes a dough. So you have to have the right flour. So I'm going to start by weighing out 150 grams of white flour. That works very quickly and that gives you a light loaf. And then the other 150 is going to be brown flour, and that improves the food value and just makes it look a little bit more wholesome. So, scales on. So I've got my 300 of flour. I'm going to put it on my trusty mat so it doesn't slip. And now I'm going to add half a teaspoon of salt. Salt helps with the flavour. And I'm using what's known as a British Standard measuring spoon. There we are, half a teaspoon of salt. This is a whole set of little spoons that fit together really well, and they go from a tablespoon down to half a teaspoon. I'm going to mix that in because if your yeast comes into direct contact with the salt, your yeast will die. Sounds drastic, but there we are. To this I'm now going to add a teaspoon of sugar, and that's food for the yeast to get it going more quickly. And I'm going to give that a stir. Actually, the next thing to do is to put some margarine in there. You can do it without margarine, but it just enriches the flavour. 25 grams of margarine, and you rub that in. And this is making sure that the sugar and the salt really are well distributed in the flour. So, it's not much margarine, it doesn't take long to get that mixed in. Okay, now for the yeast. You can buy it in a box and you'll get half a dozen little sachets. You only need one of these. And if you decide to increase the amount of bread you want to make, this is enough for anything up to a whole kilo of flour. So in goes the yeast, dried yeast. Sometimes the baker will sell you fresh yeast and that looks, well, it looks a bit like plasticine to start with, and it melts in the hot water. So our next ingredient is going to be 225 mils of tepid water, and the best way to get that is to use a mixture of boiling water and cold. So I'm going to put some cold water in from the tap first and then top it up with boiling. Right, so that is tepid water. That goes in all at once, and you start to stir. This is going to be a messy recipe, this one, and so I've got no jewellery on today, no rings. It won't do your rings any good at all to get a lump of dough stuck behind. So stir. There we are, that's stirred enough. Clean off the knife. And we're going to get this onto the worktop. So make some space. Get rid of my trusty mat, get rid of my scales. And I need some flour on the worktop surface. It doesn't matter if you use white or brown, but keep it handy. I like to have a little lump just there as well. Out it comes. Now it feels lovely and warm. It's very soft. And it actually feels quite wet. But the thing about bread, which is what I never learnt as a child, was that if the dough is wet, it works better. So wetter is better. That doesn't mean you can have a sloppy mess, but it needs to be a nice soft dough. So on the worktop, get rid of your bowl. And the next thing to do is to start to knead. So coat it in flour so that you're not going to get too sticky to start with. And then kneading, really, it doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you're stretching the dough so that you're stretching the gluten. So you can push it away from you and bring it over. Use the heels of the hand, push it away, bring it over, push it away, then it's getting a funny shape, so push it that way, bring it over. push it away, a bit sticky. And if you can set up a rhythm, you can do it anyhow you like. But really, the clue is, if you're starting to feel tired, you're doing a good job. Right, I think that's enough. I'm feeling pretty weary. So the next thing to do is decide what you're going to do with it. You can cook it in all sorts of different shapes, and I've got one or two things here to show you. This will be enough to make 1 loaf in a 2-pound tin, or 2 loaves in 1-pound tins. Or if you're feeling really adventurous, you can even cook it in a flower pot. I promise you it's not been anywhere near the garden. It's a brand new flower pot that's only ever been used to cook with, but you need to line it with greaseproof paper, and you must remember to put a piece in the bottom, because as the bread rises, it rises downwards as well as upwards, so it will come out through the hole in the bottom. So you could use a flower pot, but make sure it's new and it's washed. I'm going to make some bread rolls, so I'm going to cut this dough into 6 pieces. So in half, and then each piece into 3. They'll stick together if you leave them too close, so move them apart, and we can start to shape. A little bit of flour on the work surface, and at this stage you need to get your tin ready, because once you've made your shape you need to put it on the baking tray. So I've got quite a big one, simply because I don't really want them touching each other. And I'm going to take a bit of margarine and just rub that all over. And then I'm going to sprinkle, sorry about the noise, just a little bit of flour on there, just to make sure they don't stick. Right, so let's get that out of the way. And the first one we're going to do is just a round roll. So you take one of your pieces of dough, and you try and just get those cut edges coated in flour, and you need to knead this just a little bit. So you pinch the edge and push it into the centre with one hand, and then you pinch and push it in with the other one. Pinch and push, and turn it round as you go. You can get faster and faster. Pinch and push. And you finish up with a lovely smooth round roll. Our second shape is a cottage loaf. So we take another of our little pieces of dough. We cut off about 1/3. That's got to be the top piece, and this is the base. Same again, pinch and push, turn as you go, pinch and push. Round and round and round. Well, that's not very good. There we are, that's the base. Now for the top. That sits on there. You take a finger, bit of flour on it, and you push your finger through, and you've got a little cottage loaf. So that goes on the tray as well. Now, what shall we do next? Let's do a knot. For this, you want your worktop to be slightly sticky so that you can roll this into quite a long sausage. What's that? That's 2 hands. And we're going to make a knot. So you pick it up, you make a loop, you take the end and you push it through, and you've got a knot. Next one is going to be a twist. This is my favourite, I love this. So again, a sausage, a bit longer this time. And you hold it in the middle, you pick it up, you hold onto one of the 2 legs and you whiz it round the other one, and the 2 twist together. How cool is that? I love it. We've got 2 left, so the next one we'll do is an S. Great if your name is Susan or Sean or something like that. So you make quite a long sausage, and you start to wind it up at one end till you get halfway, and then you wind in the other direction from the bottom, and you finish up with an S. And then the last one, I can feel this is rising, this is actually quite spongy. The last one is going to be a plait. People feel challenged by plaits, especially if they've never had long hair. So cut this into 3. 1, 2, 3. And each of these pieces needs to be a sausage. Not too long. What's that? That's just a little bit longer than my span. So that's the first one. The second one needs to match it. Yeah. And the third one. Right, now, really you need to line them up in front of you and pinch the top together so they're well and truly stuck. And then this is all about overlapping each of the 3 pieces. So you take the right hand one and you put it in between the other 2. Then you take the left hand one and put that in between the 2. Right one in the middle, left one in the middle, right one in the middle, left one in the middle, right one in the middle, left one in the middle, and then you pinch them all together at the end. And there you've got a plait. Now if you're not happy with your shapes, if at this stage you think, oh, that's not good enough, you can screw it up, re-knead it and do it all over again. But I'm going to leave that because that's actually not too bad. And that goes on the tray. Give them all a bit of space. And at this stage, you need to cover them up and leave them to rise. So to cover them up, I'm going to use my cling film and some oil. So a long piece of cling film, put just about half a teaspoon or so, it doesn't matter too much, a little bit of oil on here. And then with a brush, just brush it all over. And that will stop it from sticking to your rolls. And you're making a nice warm tent for them to rise in. So pick it up carefully because it will stick to itself if it gets the chance. And rest that on the top. Don't tuck it in, just let it sit on the top, because as they rise, you want this to rise up with them, otherwise it stops them and holds them down. And these are going to rise in a warm place. If you're doing this in the winter, you can just sit a chair in front of a radiator. If it's in the summer, you might need to put the oven on to low, and that's what I'm going to do. I turn the oven on now to number 1, gas mark 1, the lowest electric setting you can get on your cooker, and leave them there until they have doubled in size. And that will depend on how warm your room is. So I can't give you an exact time, anything from half an hour to an hour, but if you put them in the fridge at this stage and leave them overnight, they will still rise even in the fridge. So you could make them in the afternoon, leave them in the fridge overnight and cook them fresh for breakfast. As you can see, these have doubled in size. It's taken about 30-40 minutes, something like that. So they're ready to go in the oven. I need to turn the oven up to number 7, and obviously we need to take off the plastic. So because we greased it, it hasn't stuck. Get that out of the way, and then they're going to cook for 15 to 20 minutes. Well, they look good. Now, to test if they're cooked, you need to pick one up, turn it over and tap the bottom, and it should sound hollow. And they're done. So onto a cooling rack. Cool. If you're tempted to eat one fresh out of the oven, oh sorry, that was not. Be careful because you'll get indigestion. There you are. Well, I hope you found this useful and you feel like having a go at making some bread for yourself. So please feel free to like this, share it, and then if you subscribe, you'll get to hear what's coming next. Bye for now.